Hi everybody and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Alicia and I'm the owner of Alicia Be Creative. In today's video, we are working on yet another 40-ounce tumbler, and we're going to keep this really super cute and simple, this sort of Oogie Boogie themed tumbler using some UV DTF and glitter, of course. Everything I use in today's video will be listed down in the description box down below, as well as any links I have and discount codes to save you a bit of money. Be sure though, before you go, be sure to give this video a huge thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you're not already, because I do post videos every Saturday. So let's go ahead and jump right into today's tutorial. All right, so I've jumped the gun a little bit on this prep already. The first thing I did was I took my 40-ounce hog tumbler, the sublimatable ones, and I went ahead and taped off the bottom. It already comes with the handle off. I've taped off the bottom. I spray painted it a flat black, and I am actually going to apply the handle back on. I'm not going to fully screw it on, but I am going to place that back on because I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to epoxy around the handle for the duration of the cup. I do want to keep the handle nice and clean, no glitter, no epoxy on it. However, I do want to epoxy the cup with the handle attached so I don't have to do any weird sanding around those edges before I adhere the arm back onto the cup. So we're going to go ahead now and prep our cup to get glittered, of course. So the bottom is still taped off after I've spray painted, so I'm going to leave that as is. But what we are going to do is, of course, we're now going to add glitter now that we've added tape to the handles to ensure we don't get any glue or any glitter on our handles. So we're going to do the epoxy method glitter application here for this tumbler. I'm going to mix up equal parts of part A and part B of Flint Scissor Supply Shop Artist Cure epoxy. When you are using epoxy, just epoxy of any brand, you want to make sure that you are thoroughly mixing your epoxy. For this, I'm only going to need about 5 mLs. So we're going to do 2.5 mLs of each part, and then we're going to mix for a good 2 to 3 minutes, I would say. If you're doing anything larger than this batch, you're definitely going to want to mix for at least 5 minutes a regular cure to ensure that it is clear, not cloudy, and it is thoroughly mixed. So we're going to go ahead and mix this. Now, I'm not worried about any bubbles whatsoever for the simple fact of this is just going to be an adhesive coat for the glitter, so I don't need to worry about bubbles being an issue. This is going to be such a thin coat of epoxy that we're applying to my cup that I don't really need to worry about the bubbles being an issue, especially underneath that layer of glitter. So once this is thoroughly mixed, we're going to go ahead and add this to the cup here. So I'm just going to use all 5 mLs, excuse me, of that epoxy. That is just going to ensure, because this is a larger cup, that I do get a really good coat here. We don't want a thick coat, like we don't want the epoxy to be sliding all over, but we do want the cup to be slick to the touch and sort of a slick, slippery surface to ensure that epoxy is going to hold our glitter. So we want to take our time here because this is a larger cup. We want to make sure we're getting epoxy on every part of the cup that we want to ensure has glitter on it. So take your time, make sure you spend time at that top and bottom edge and around that handle, which sometimes can be a little bit tricky, but we're going to go ahead and just ensure that this is all spread out nice and thin on the cup. We don't have any epoxy pooling anywhere, and we shouldn't with such a thin coat. And then we'll go ahead and add our glitter. So the glitter we're going to be using is Morticia from Batty Glitter. This is a beautiful black glitter that has some other sort of like hollow flecks within it. So it gives a beautiful rainbow shift within the black. And this is the glitter that we're going to use as our black base. I love to use black glitters, but if you've used a true black glitter, typically it doesn't shine under epoxy. So using glitters that are either mixed with like a white that'll give it some shine, or that have these sort of reflective pieces within the mix itself is definitely going to help you get a really beautiful shiny black. It won't be a true black technically, but I do love how this sparkles and shines even under epoxy. So we're going to tap off the excess there, and we're going to go ahead and just ensure our cup is fully coated in glitter. Make sure our edges are nice and covered. Tap again off that excess, and then we're going to go ahead and get the tape removed off of this. So we want to, of course, remove the tape for the fact of we don't want this epoxy to dry completely with that tape still on there, because then it'll be a real pain in the butt to try and get that, of course, off. So this is what our cup looks like so far. This cup is going to dry for a few hours, and then we're going to get it on the turner for 2 coats of epoxy. I did end up just taping off the handle again and the bottom to ensure I didn't get epoxy on in any of those sections that of course I don't want epoxy on, and I just sort of worked around it. So I just pretended that the handle was a section I didn't want to be epoxy, just like the bottom, and treated it as such. You'll see my epoxy process at the end for one of my last final coats, but that is really what I did for the entire process of this cup. So now it's time to sand. Now that we've gotten 2 coats of epoxy on our cup, we're going to go ahead and sand, of course, that top rim where we're going to have most of those, edges of glitter and sharp pieces sticking up. We'll sand that down with a 60 grit sanding block. We'll also pay attention to the bottom edge too. Make sure we have a nice smooth edge where that glitter is going to meet the smooth edge of the stainless steel that's exposed. And of course, sand anything that is not completely smooth. That way we can go ahead and have our decals applied and have a nice smooth surface to work on when we get into our final coats. We're going to clean this off with 91% rubbing alcohol and a paper towel. Just remove any of that sanding debris, of course, and ensure that none of that debris ends up in our final coats of epoxy. So for our decals, we're going to keep it simple like I mentioned in the introduction. This video is meant to be just a fun, cute, quick idea for those spooky cup designs. And we're going to use a UV DTF that is found in and on my website. This is the Oogie Dice UV DTF wrap. And we're going to deconstruct this wrap and apply it to this 40 ounce. I absolutely love using UV DTF, and you guys know this because I've used quite a few of them across my channel over the last few months. I love to use these, and I feel like people always forget that you don't have to use the wraps that are of course sized to fit a 16 ounce like glass can or plastic can. You can deconstruct these and place them however you feel like. However you want to apply your UV DTF to cups, use larger size cups, use smaller size cups, use things that are not cups, apply them to your car, apply them to notebooks, apply them to lunch boxes. There are so many uses for UV DTF that are not just strictly cups, and sometimes I feel like we forget those things. So I'm going to start with this wrap by taking all of the little cute little Oogie guys, and we're going to place them kind of evenly around the cup, making sure they're not too close together because we will want to add the other elements that are part of this wrap to the tumbler. So we're going to start with the little Oogie guys, a few on the front by the main decal, and then of course a couple on the back side as well to just give a well-rounded look to the decals that we're applying on this cup. So once I've gone ahead and applied my little Oogie guys, we'll then go ahead and apply the other pieces. I did end up cutting out like all the little die and placing those separately too. I wasn't going to then add like the little black bats and the little star shapes that are on here. I ended up going back through and doing so though. You can see them when you're looking at the cup. It is very hard to see it through the camera view, of course, because of just the shine of the lights from my studio. So I know that's a little bit difficult to see, but you can see those bats and those little stars when you are looking directly at the cup. It's just not quite apparent from the direct view of my camera angle because of the lights that are in my area. So we're going to go ahead and finish all of these, getting them all applied, of course, smooth, simple, easy, and that's it. I don't have to do any weeding, no cutting, no fighting with Cricut, and my decal work is done. The final thing we're going to do before we seal in our decals is we're going to go ahead and get our screws back into our handle to ensure we have a nice secure handle before we go into our final coats of epoxy. So just putting those little screws back into where they go, making sure everything's secure and flush, and then we're going to go ahead and now take the time to seal our UV DTF so we have no issues in our final coats of epoxy. So to seal, I've been using just Mod Podge. You could use polyacrylic if you wish to as well. I do have that. I typically just use Mod Podge because it works just as well, and I always have more of that on hand than I do have polyacrylic typically. But anything that you typically would use to seal, you know, glitter or anything is perfect to use over your UV DTF. That even includes a spray sealer if that's your preference of choice. So once the Mod Podge has fully dried, probably anywhere from about 20 to 30 minutes, and it is clear. We're going to go ahead and get this back on the turner so we can get our final coats of epoxy. Now, of course, because we're doing coats of epoxy, we do want to make sure that we tape everything back off, that we don't want to have epoxy on it. So I'm going to take my time now to use some painter's tape to just tape around the handle where the handle meets the cup, and take some more tape and of course tape off the bottom for our final coats. When I tape off the bottom, I am, you're noticing, not quite going right up against the glitter line. I want there to be a nice seal to the stainless steel of the cup. So I'm going to go below that glitter line to get a nice smooth finish and not have any issues with a good adherence of the epoxy to the stainless steel. We're going to mix up equal parts, of course, of our Flynn Sisters Artist Cure epoxy and go ahead and get this applied with a glove. Typically, I do either the pour on or scoop on method, so I'm taking just a little bit of epoxy at a time and just smoothing that on the cup, working in sections and making my way around the cup. With the handle, I try and just take a little bit extra time to just be a little bit slower than I am, because sometimes I do kind of like sling epoxy around my space. So I try and control it when I'm working with a handled cup so I don't end up with epoxy all over the handle and not a lot of cleanup process that I would need to do later. Making sure though that I'm getting around those handled areas so everything is nice and sealed and secured, and also making sure to get under that handle area, which sometimes can sort of lack epoxy because it's not easily as accessible as the rest of the cup, of course. After that coat is kind of settled for a minute, I did torch, and I decided I wanted to add a little extra glitter. So we're going to go in with a sprinkling of Daydream from Batty Glitter just to add a little bit of extra sparkle to the final coats here. Nothing too crazy, just in those open sections where it's just the black glitter. I'm just adding a little bit of highlight of this silver Daydream color within the epoxy coat. So I'm going to go ahead, now that it has set and I'm done touching this, we're going to go ahead and remove the tape immediately. You could wait for anywhere from 20 to 30 minutes, set a timer or something if you want the epoxy to set a little longer. I always do it right away because I tend to forget if I don't. And again, it's a big hairy mess if you have to then try and get this tape off once it's literally adhered with epoxy. So that is it. It'll get one more final coat, but here is the final look at this cute and spooky Oogie Boogie tumbler. I love how this came out, and I know I say that every time, but sometimes it's just fun to make art. And so when you enjoy what you do, you love absolutely every creation that comes out of your shop. And this is definitely one of them. Simple, easy, really great cup to create very simply. Not a lot of steps, of course, and it's cute. So that is it for today's tutorial. I hope that you guys did enjoy the video. If you did, give this video a huge thumbs up and subscribe to my channel, and I'll be back again with another tutorial next week. Bye!